Hi everyone, I'm Toriana Meadows, and this is my reflection on who controls higher education. The first question asks who's held accountable for higher education and how do they achieve accountability. From the reading, I got that the federal government and the state are held accountable, the state being primary and the federal government being secondary. The state actually provides the framework for the legal framework for private and public institutions. They focus primarily on being an overseer for the public interest and higher education service. The state actually was not much concerned with student performance until the late 1900s when they required institutions to assess student learning and to provide this information to the state as well as the public. And now the institutions can voluntarily share their accreditation, but they already have the national pressure to do so, so most of them do. The federal government has three roles in higher education: federal student aid, tax policies, and research. The federal student aid was put into place to help students, mainly minorities and low-income students. This was to eventually help them get out of poverty, have higher wages, and better jobs once they completed their education. Now students are actually required to be in academic good standing in order to continuously receiving student financial aid. The tax policies were also put into place by the federal government that would help families with student funding for education, for higher education. They provide exclusions, exemptions, credits, and deductions to families through these tax policies. And it also helps with addressing that burden that institutions are increasing their prices and families need more help because their salaries are not increasing. So the tax policies, they have the HOPE policy, which provides $1,500 to a student per year, which helps them with tuition. And then they also have the lifetime learning, which also helps with student funding and gives the families 20% that will help with tuition and related expenses. The federal government also offers research funding for research to institutions. These are really normally large institutions that receive this funding, and the National Science Foundation, or the NSF, is the largest source for providing funding for this research. The demand for federal funding for research actually is increasing, but the federal government is being pulled in other ways, which is considered a priority over the research. So their funding is going more to other areas. And the research has to be beneficial to the society, and the Congress is actually who is in charge of saying which projects will be funded. The second question talks about issues that the faculty and students and public have different opinions about. The first one I came across, or that I thought was important, was that the students and the public are dissatisfied with the institution's programs that they're offering, or feel like they're not getting their money's worth from these institutions. Students are borrowing more and more money because prices are increasing, but they aren't officially satisfied with their education. Institutions were actually, or maybe some still are, increasing their prices so that they match the federal aid that students are receiving. It's a plus because the federal government, or pro, I should say, is that the federal government is still giving these students the money to match these institutions. But the con is that the institution is forcing these students into uncontrollable debt, and that they are not focused on the retention rates. They're more concerned about the money that's being received. I feel like that in order for this to be handled, that the institution, or the federal government needs to put something in place to oversee that the institutions are not overcharging students or not putting things into place that don't need to be put into place for extra money. The federal government actually did something about this, where they went down on institutions about their high student loan rates, and it forced the institutions to eliminate the system that they were actually abusing. The second issue that I saw was that although it's a state thing, it had a problem with the faculty and the public, that the state focused on institutional concerns. They protected the institution from competition for students and for other resources that were provided. But the weakness in this is that the board and the system leadership kept overturning. There were a lot of turnovers, and they couldn't focus on public agendas, which was a problem. The leaders seemed to be more concerned with the competitiveness of their institution rather than the policy leadership and the policies essential to making sure that the higher education responds to the public priorities. In order for this to be amend between the two, I feel like the state needs to give some concern in public interest, and the state level also needs to lead the change between these, because faculty and staff members are so focused on making sure that the institution is competitive, they're missing the things that the public or the students may need. And the third question was about my opinion of who controls higher education. And in my opinion, the federal government definitely does control, because they fund students that attend college and help them continuously pay for college. Although they're going in uncontrollable debt, they're also given the opportunity to actually receive an education. They offer tax benefits to families as much as they can to help these students get through. And they are also offering the federal research funding, because without it, the institutions wouldn't be able to do research at all. So I feel like federal government is in charge, because the state would not be able to fully support the institution and the students all by themselves. Thanks.